يا راغبا في كل علم نافع.
ينمو العلم ويتقدم بتقنياته ومجالاته، ومعه نطور أدواتنا في تقديم العلم الشرعي. أكاديمية
زاد أكاديمية ينبوعها صاف ليروي غلة الظمآن. وتعلم الفقه الميسر عاملا بالشرع دون تعصب لفلان. بشرى لنا زاد أكاديمية للعلم كالأزهار في البستان.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وآله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهداه. Today we will talk about an important aspect of mending mistakes that happen in our prayers. And this is known as sujood sahu, or the prostration of forgetfulness. These two prostrations take place at the end of our prayer when there is an error made. And the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, if one of you forgets something in his prayer, let him prostrate twice. And this is his doing. The Prophet did this, alayhi salatu wasalam, and the consensus of scholars that it is to be done. And there are three reasons for it. Either one adds something to the prayer, or omits something in the prayer, or doubts whether he did something wrong or not. Now, having said that, we must acknowledge that you may make a mistake in one of the pillars of the salat, or one of the mandatory acts of salat, or something that is part of the voluntary acts of salat. In pillars of salat, your prayer is invalid if you skip something and do not offer it in the prayer. So for example, Fajr prayer has 2 ruku' and 4 sujood. This is pillars. If I prayed 2 rak'ahs of Fajr and offered 3 sujood and concluded my salat and then remembered, should I compensate that by 2 sujood sahu? The answer is no. If I don't manage to offer the 4th missed rukun pillar, my prayer is invalid. So I have to offer it and then fix whatever can be fixed. If someone prays Dhuhr prayer 3 rak'ahs and concludes the prayer and someone reminds him, he cannot compensate that by offering sujood sahu. He has to stand up and pray a full rak'ah, which is a pillar, then compensate that mistake with 2 sujood sahu. In mandatory acts, such if a person forgets to say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, or does not offer the first tashahhud, and he goes to remember at the end of the salat, he compensates this with 2 sujood sahu. So skipping it out of forgetfulness or ignorance can be compensated. Not in the case of rukun, a pillar. And especially if this is the first pillar, takbiratul ihram, he doesn't offer it. And in the middle of the salat, he remembers, whoops, I didn't offer takbiratul ihram. Okay, I'll compensate that by sujood sahu. No, your whole prayer is invalid. You have to start from the beginning. So sort of something that is not confusing at all. It's very easy to find a way to correct it and rectify it. Now, we have to remember that the Prophet ﷺ made such sujood as-sahu in his prayers during his lifetime, as per the hadith of Abu Mas'ud, the hadith of Abu Hurairah, Abdullah ibn Buhayna, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, and others. But we find that the Prophet sometimes did the two prostrations of sahu before concluding his prayer with salam, and sometimes he did it after concluding his prayer with salam. So when to do this and when to do that? Now, we will explain this according to the textbook, then try to simplify it in our own ways if this is possible. The first reason for prostrating for forgetfulness is when you increase something to the prayer. If the worshipper adds something to the prayer, such as bowing, prostration, standing, or tashahhud, that is not supposed to be, then you are recommended to do the prostration of forgetfulness after concluding the prayer with salam. And the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud backs this up. The Prophet once prayed 5 rak'ahs instead of 4. And the people followed him. After he offered the salam, the people started to, talk between themselves and to murmur. So the Prophet said, "What is the matter with you?" So they said, "O Prophet of Allah, has something been added to the prayer?" He said, "No." So they said, "You prayed 5 rak'ah." So the Prophet ﷺ immediately turned and prostrated twice. Then he said the salam again. Then he said, "I'm only human like you. I forget as you forget. So if one of you forgets something in the prayer, let him prostrate twice." And this was reported by Al-Imam Muslim. Now, if you know this during the prayer, you have to stop this addition. Because if you continued while knowing about it, it will invalidate your prayer. So someone is in the 5th rak'ah. And while he's in the 5th rak'ah, he remembers that, whoops, this is my 5th rak'ah. What should he do? He should immediately sit down for tashahhud. He must not continue, said, "Well, I started the 5th rak'ah, I have to conclude it and then conclude my prayer." Because if he does this, this prayer is invalid. Likewise, if he is in the 3rd sujood, and then he remembers that this is the 3rd, not the 2nd, so immediately he has to stand up and continue the prayer. The second reason for offering the prostration of forgetfulness is when a person omits from his prayer. So if you omitted something that's mandatory, not a pillar, then you have to offer sujood al-sahu before salam. Like if you, as I mentioned earlier, if you skip saying Subhan Rabbi Alim, Subhan Rabbi Al-A'la, or the first tashahhud, and likewise. And the evidence backing it up, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Buhayna, may Allah be pleased with him. He said that the Prophet of Allah ﷺ led us in one afternoon prayers, that is Dhuhr or Asr, in 2 rak'ahs. Then he stood up and did not sit down for the first tashahhud. And the people stood up with him. When he had finished his prayer and we were waiting for him to say the salam, he said takbir before the salam and prostrated twice. Then he was sitting. When he said the taslim. So this is the sunnah. When you drop a mandatory act of prayer. What if someone omits something that is a pillar? Anything other than takbiratul ihram. For example, if a person forgets the Fatiha, now this is a pillar, or forgets to offer ruku' or a prostration. If you did not reach its place in the following rak'ah, then you have to go back to it immediately. Example, I'm praying, Allahu Akbar, I skip Fatiha. And I say, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu Akbar, make ruku', Sami Allahu liman hamida, make first sajda, Subhan Rabbil A'la. Then I remember, I didn't recite the Fatiha. What should I do? I should immediately stand up and consider everything I did to be void and recite the Fatiha. Then the surah. Then do the ruku' and the sujood as if I did not do any ruku' or sujood, because it's void because I did not recite the Fatiha in the order. But if I said Allahu Akbar, skipped the Fatiha, did my ruku', did my 2 sujood, stood up for the second rak'ah, and now I am at the time of the second rak'ah, Fatiha, and I remembered, whoops, I didn't recite the Fatiha. This rak'ah is totally void, and I start reciting the Fatiha for my first rak'ah and act as if this is my first rak'ah. What about the ruku' and the 2 sujood and all what I've done? All is void because I had skipped a pillar of the salat, and this is something that is unforgiven. The same thing with ruku', the same thing with sujood. And I have to, all cases, in such cases, offer the 2 prostrations of forgetfulness after the salam. Why? Because I've added all these acts that are considered to be void. So I have to add this to this is an addition in the salat, and I offer the 2 prostrations of forgetfulness after the salam. The third type, or the reason, or the scenario, is when I'm uncertain. And this uncertainty is divided into 2 types. Either I am totally blinded, totally confused. I cannot have any inclination to either one. And in this case, I have to do what is certain and omit the doubt and offer 2 prostrations of forgetfulness before the salam. The Prophet says, alayhi salatu wasalam, if one of you is uncertain about his prayer and does not know how many rak'ah he has prayed, 3 or 4, then let him ignore what he is uncertain about and proceed on the basis of what he is certain of, then prostrate twice before he says the taslim. So when I'm doubtful, this is my 3rd or is it my 4th rak'ah? Which is uncertain? The answer is the 4th. This is uncertain. So the Prophet says, omit the uncertainty, which is the 4th, and act as if you prayed only 3, follow that with the 4th, and then offer 2 prostrations of forgetfulness and make that before the salam. This is scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 is when your doubt has an inclination to it. So I'm praying and I'm doubtful. Did I prostrate once or twice? Is this my 2nd prostration or the 1st? I'm inclined to either one. So I should act upon my gut feeling and continue my prayer. So if I have an inclination that this is my 2nd, I should stand up and continue my prayer as normal. But due to this doubt with the inclination, I must offer 2 prostrations of forgetfulness after the salam. And the hadith that backs it up, the Prophet said, alayhi salatu salam, concerning the one who is uncertain and not sure, he says, let him determine what he thinks is right. Meaning, follow your gut feeling. Then complete his prayer on that basis. Then let him say the taslim, then prostrate twice. This is the way of the Prophet ﷺ when the prostration of forgetfulness is mandatory. Now, some scholars say that it is recommended to offer the prostration of forgetfulness when you skip voluntary acts. So, for example, if you're used to raising your hands when you bow and rise up from ruku' and you forgot to raise your hands, then it's recommended that you offer sujood as sahu, but it is not mandatory. And I personally am inclined to say that one should not do that, because the Pandora box would be opened and OCD would jump in your head every time you pray. Did I leave this? Did I leave that? Which is voluntary to begin with. And you burden yourself by offering sujood as-sahu every single prayer, and this is not part of the sunnah, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
يا راغبا في كل علم نافع
ينمو العلم ويتقدم بتقنياته ومجالاته، ومعه نطور أدواتنا في تقديم العلم الشرعي. أكاديمية
زاد أكاديمية ينبوعها صاف ليروي غلة الظمآن، وتعلم الفقه الميسر عاملا بالشرع دون تعصب لفلان. بشرى لنا زاد أكاديمية للعلم كالأزهار في البستان.